Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. Our government drafts, debates, and approves laws that govern important areas of our amyloidosis community. These laws can impact things like funding for research, patient access to treatments, and costs for patients. For example, copay relief, just naming one. And as we'll hear today in our discussion with Kathi Luis from the Amyloidosis Foundation, it's absolutely critical that the voice of our community is heard by our legislators so that they're aware of our issues and can work to design and advance appropriate solutions. Welcome, Kathi. It's wonderful to have you join us on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, I'm not sure how many of our listeners know much about legislative matters that are specific to amyloidosis and rare disease. I personally am not very familiar with this process, but I do know that the rule of law matters. So, perhaps you can start by educating us on why legislation is important for our amyloidosis community specifically.
Absolutely. There's multiple ways that legislation can benefit the amyloidosis community. For example, it can provide funding for the NIH or FDA, and this is done by supporting amyloidosis research, developing new treatment options, accelerating clinical trials, and ultimately, the goal here is leading to the approval of novel therapies that can improve the quality of life for patients suffering from our condition. This includes funding for basic science research to understand the disease mechanisms, clinical trials to test new drugs, and collaborations with patient advocacy groups to address those unmet medical needs in the amyloidosis treatment. Um, it could drive policy decisions that directly affect our patient community, like you had mentioned, the copay relief. It could create a rare disease advisory council in a state, which what they do, they make recommendations to improve the lives of the amyloidosis patients. It could also improve access to therapies. There are several different bipartisan bills right now in legislation that are important to the rare disease community, two of which encourage drug development, and also another two that would make it easier for many rare disease patients to access the necessary care.
So, thank you for highlighting that. It's clear that there are lots of different ways that this legislation directly impacts our community. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about how do you mentioned the two bills. How does a bill become a law?
That's a great question. It starts with an idea of what we would like to change or what's needed in our community. Once the wording is settled on, it's introduced either in the House or the Senate by a congressperson or senator. Then it gets assigned to a committee for discussion and amending the vote. The amending is usually with the verbiage of the bill. If approved, then it goes to the full House or Senate for further discussion, amending, and voting. If it's passed there, it goes to the other chamber. So if it's introduced in the House, then and it's passed there, then it goes to the Senate and vice versa, for the same similar process. Once it's approved by both chambers, then a joint committee meets to resolve the differences between the House version of the bill and the Senate version of the bill.
Mm.
Then it gets sent to the president for final approval or veto, in which case it's sent back to Congress, and the process starts all over again. Uh, it can be really arduous and time consuming to accommodate edits with all of the different impacts of the timeline of the bill, and changing administrations like we're seeing in this year can also impact the process and the content of the bill.
Yeah. Clearly a very long and almost potentially endless process, unfortunately. But let's talk a little bit about who are some of the organizations that are involved in these bills and what are some of the things that they focus on when it comes to amyloidosis?
Yes, in the rare disease space, we have NORD, which is the National Organization of Rare Disorders. They focus on everything rare. We have Every Life Foundation, and they have a sister organization called RDLA, and that stands for Rare Disease Legislative Advocates. They focus on issues that impact the broader rare disease community as opposed to a specific disease. And they advocate for policy or different policies on diagnosis, medication access, treatments, and cures. There is the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus, and they're a bipartisan forum, and they are comprised of members of Congress, and it's a vital platform for discussing pressing issues on policy that affect rare disease, including amyloidosis. Uh, Focus specifically on amyloidosis is done by me at the Amyloidosis Foundation, also by pharmaceutical companies. They have policy teams. So the pharmaceutical companies that are focused on treatments for amyloidosis, they would be involved in this. And there's other stakeholders in the amyloidosis community as well, other nonprofits that focus on policy.
I must say it is hopeful to hear
Very.
that there are so many different organizations that are really working to advance the rare disease space. And most importantly, you all at the Amyloidosis Foundation who are working for amyloidosis specifically. So that's just really heartwarming to hear. And I want to talk a little bit more about what can patients do to help support the work that you do at the Amyloidosis Foundation?
Oh, absolutely. I would say the top thing, the top point here is to tell your story to legislators.
Mhm.
You can meet with your elected officials in person to tell your story, educate them, share your perspectives, and advocate for yourself, family member, or friend. Obviously, many voices are more powerful than a single voice, although your single voice does make an impact. People could accompany me to meetings on the Hill with legislators to bring the voice of the community to their attention. Um, the thing is, legislators are rarely aware of the challenges we face in our community because they don't face them themselves.
Mm.
So the stories are so impactful. They can draft, support, or promote legislation if they aren't aware of the challenges of our community. You can also communicate through with lawmakers through phone calls, emails, letters, even social media. Most of our legislators are on X, which is formerly Twitter, and also Facebook. And to find them, you can search the internet or get a hold of me, and I'll find out for you. Um, including in your letter, tell your story again. Like I said, they don't know those challenges unless we tell them.
Mm.
Could you not afford your medication? Could you not get a hold of your medication? Um, mention how you got diagnosed, how long it took, challenges you face, like I said before, access, affordability, drug treatment cost, your copay costs, or any insurance issues. A lot of legislators can also help when you're facing challenges with insurance.
I appreciate you sharing some ways that the patients can get involved because there clearly are lots of different ways and different levels, so to speak, of engagement and involvement that they could participate in based on, you know, life and disease circumstances. So thank you so much for sharing those. And Kathy, I want to thank you for sharing the incredibly valuable work you do at the Amyloidosis Foundation and how grateful as a community we are for the work that you do. And in closing, just want to offer you an opportunity to leave our listeners with any sort of message or last thoughts.
Sure. Like I had mentioned before, one voice can promote change and make an impact. You
Yeah,
have to make
one
that voice heard.
yeah, absolutely. It can be such an incredibly powerful thing. Thank you again. It was so wonderful to have you join us today on the podcast,
Thank you for having me.
of course. And to our listeners, if this is anything you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like to get involved with, you can always contact Kathi Luis. You can reach her by email at Kathi, that's Kathi, at amyloidosis.org. And I really ask that you do remember her words that one voice can make a difference. So thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's Mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.